Welcome back once more, our yokai and humans, to the Higanbana Bookclub Podcast. We're here for episode 3, and that means chapters 1 to 4 of the second night is what we'll be discussing today. So this week, I, Aspirety, am joined by MagusVerborum once more.
Hey, it's good to be back. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to discussing these chapters with you.
Awesome. VyseGolbez.
Hello.
And joining us for the first time on this podcast, we have amenenee.
Hello.
I had to rethink the pronunciation in my head for a second time.
It's okay. I haven't even thought about how to pronounce it, so.
Oh my goodness.
So we've just finished the first night. We just came out from the controversial Utopia discussion.
Oh my goodness, that was so good though.
And now we're here with some chapters that I think are very well received. I like specifically chapter 2 and 4 here seem to be very popular with our readers, so quite excited to get into those. And we also have some other chapters which are a bit less consequential, but we'll see what we can make of them. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right in with chapter 1, the Lunar Festival. Who would like to give us a brief recap of this chapter?
So, chapter 1, Lunar Festival. Essentially, we get a neat little kind of 30-minute bite of Marie's experience with the Lunar Festival, which is a time when yokai can come together and drink together and be merry and meet each other and all that sort of thing. Because Marie hasn't really met everyone before.
Yeah, it's kind of important for us because we're finally introduced to the rest of the yokai. I think that's this chapter is setting out a promise to the reader that yes, we're finally going to meet all these yokai.
Definitely.
Halfway through the story and we finally get a roll call.
We get a nice little moment where Maria is like, I'm going to go meet the second-ranked yokai, and she goes to meet the black tea gentleman, and she gets a is it a bottle thrown at her? Something silly. She totally messes up, which is kind of cute and hilarious. Yeah, I really enjoyed Izanamu's introduction because he's more important in the next chapter, but he's a very bold personality that Maria
I liked
has.
him the first moment I saw him. I was like, this is going to be a cool character.
He's big.
He felt suspicious to me personally.
Yeah, you
felt like he was up to some mischief. I felt like he was the bad guy.
I feel like all the yokai are up to some mischief in one way or another, so I don't think you're wrong.
I don't know. I mean, I sort of just singled him out as, this is gonna be some major antagonist or something.
In some ways he is. We'll talk more about that later. That's a good angle for this. Let's talk about first impressions of the new cast here. Who else were we introduced to?
Kyo of the Mirror. I just cannot handle the way that he was represented. He literally says, I am the coolest of the cool. I cannot handle a character who says that. It's too much for me. He thinks so much of himself. And
he's pretty much Yoshino from Rewrite.
He's pretty
I don't
intense.
know. I was excited to see if he would get a chapter of his own because I thought that was interesting. I wanted to see if in his chapter he would keep that up.
Yeah, definitely.
That he was just the coolest.
Yeah, definitely. I want to see if he would keep his edgelord.
Characters who call themselves the coolest are always the comic relief, so...
Yeah. He's pretty fun.
I was actually fearing, because we didn't get to see his sprite yet, that we wouldn't get to see Renoir at all.
Yeah, I was very worried about that.
Yeah, he just wouldn't be very important.
But in the end, there was actually a reason for not showing the sprite, if we think about it.
Yeah, it would have been a bit of a spoiler, I guess.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty clever.
Well, Ryokishi would have had to make another sprite because...
Yeah, he cut his hair.
Yeah, exactly, and at the time of the Lunar Festival that didn't happen yet.
It's all long.
Yeah,
definitely.
Clever. He probably realized that in post. It's like, oh crap, I gotta take Renoir out of this scene.
I can't put him in yet for the reveal. Who else are we introduced to for the first time? I'm trying to think.
We have Azami.
Oh, of course
she
we
felt
do.
suspicious too.
Oh yeah, she's so suspicious. She's a bad guy. I can tell just by looking at her sprite. Simri's all, oh, she's actually a really bad person, and I'm like, I know, I can tell, just based on her attitude towards Marie. Oh,
That's the
I
impression I,
mean,
got
whoever
too.
is a good friend of Sumire is gonna be a bad guy.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so we're introduced to all these characters. We have some nice little back and forth, including the nurse, who is not a yokai, but is at the yokai festival for whatever reason, because she's drunk. Apparently that makes it just
She's
works.
just looking for a man.
I guess so. She cries into the headmaster's chest. She's so adorable. Oh my goodness.
It really confused me to see the nurse there.
Yeah.
I sort of felt like from that moment, maybe that scene wasn't really happening.
Yeah.
I mean, unless she's some kind of yokai too, I just don't see why she'd...
But the explanation
on
they
the
gave
rooftop
was
with
really
them.
good. She's drunk, so it's fine.
She's already halfway
Oh.
out of this regular world into the world of
She
Yeah.
won't
goodness.
remember.
Yep.
Yeah. It's very silly.
I was like,
She's-
I was very satisfied with that explanation. I kind of just took it. Whatever, I'll take it.
I mean, her whole character is just very silly. I'm still on her case. I can't believe that she has no significance later on. Look, I'm on her. She is
I'm in the same boat too.
secretly a yokai. I'm calling it now. When it happens, you'll all know. Iso and me, we got this.
I'm looking forward to it.
The big reveal. Yeah. The chapter kind of
rumor come out.
culminates in, as Iso kind of said, there's this kind of unreliable nature to the whole thing because Marie drinks the juice of the cherry blossoms of, do they say it's of the school building? I can't remember what they call it in the moment, but it's revealed to be like the juice of
I think
these...
it's like of the underworld, I think they said.
Yes, exactly. The fruit of the underworld, one might say. But Marie consumes this, and Higanbana's all, that shouldn't happen, that doesn't exist. Like, you never even came to the party. And by the end of the episode, or the chapter rather, we're kind of questioning how much of what we saw is real, whether Marie really, like, met these characters at all. She clearly had some kind of spiritual experience, which I thought was really cool. I thought it was really interesting to kind of think about. But
I sort of interpreted it as like the school building accepting her
Yep.
among the 8 mysteries.
yeah, I
Sort of
definitely
like
agree.
an initiation, like, hey, you're
Yeah.
one of us now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I think that's
Or
a good way
maybe-
of looking at it.
The school building just might be happy that it has an inhabitant.
yes.
As far as I know, she's the only yokai in there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's very interesting. I think that it comes back to, and I didn't really understand the symbolism when I first like read, like, oh, spider lilies, they're like flowers that grow out of graves. Like, I didn't really understand what that would mean going forward, but
I
there's,
did not know that.
yes, that's their like symbolism. They're supposed to be like a symbol of sadness and loss and like all that sort of thing. But I think that Ryuguchi is kind of playing with that symbolism and giving it a twist of hope, because we're seeing, I have like a list of all the things that are like positive things growing in negative places, if that makes sense. Like how Marie is a yokai who's doing good things, and how Marie is in the school building, which is supposedly a dead place. Like good
Yeah.
people
That's
coming
a
out
good
of the
way
school.
to look at it.
Yeah. Trying to find my exact quote on this, but I think that similar to the way that the Higanbana grows out of graves, Mario is growing out of the school building. And not only that, but she is growing out of a very traumatic experience. Like, I feel like the symbolism...
That's a really cool comparison, actually.
The symbolism there is, it's in everything. If you read any given chapter in Night 1 or 2, like, that symbolism is everywhere. This idea that something positive can come from something negative.
And this image shows up in the title screen too, of all the Higanbana growing on the school rooftop. I assume the old school building.
Is that...
Yeah, that's the same background that's used for in that chapter, and since it happened at the old school building, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'm very confident in that my theory on that symbolism. It's never like explicitly stated, but that's definitely something that's happening at the end of the chapter here. The school building.
I mean, I think that's kind of like Higanbana's like real focus, is it's kind of like an ode to those who have passed, and it's definitely more of a positive thing than a negative thing.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Because Marie's life was suffering, but it's after her life that she was able to find some, resolution.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like more confirmation for that is that the character Higanbana herself seems to have an attachment to Marie as well.
And
Despite their personalities not really being similar.
well, yeah, it's kind of like they both make each other better in different ways.
I always thought it was really interesting that Higanbana is so, insistent that Marie's her friend, don't hurt her.
Yeah. I think that relationship between the two of them is really special. I think that they bring out the best in one another.
Oh yeah, one point. Some people were also amazed by that. In this one chapter, we actually get we got an animated background.
Oh,
yeah. I was gonna say that.
Was it cherry blossom petals? I think.
Yeah, it was cherry blossom.
It was
petals.
Very pretty, despite the low frame rate.
Look, it's about the heart. It's not about the graphical fidelity. Yeah, I really enjoyed that animation.
I won't talk too much about that. You said something about juice of the underworld.
Oh yeah. I immediately, when I was reading about how this plant comes from the underworld, or it comes from a dead place, it reminded me of, I believe it's Greek mythology, the story of Persephone and Hades. Basically how the story goes is that Hades, who go to the underworld, really loved Persephone, who's in charge of life and growth and creation up in the mortal world. And so he tempts her into the underworld by making her eat a pomegranate seed, which is like the fruit of the underworld. It's an evil, I guess it's a fruit. Because it's all like that hard exterior. That's why people are like, oh, it's the fruit of the underworld. It's such a strange fruit. And I thought that there were some interesting parallels there with the way that Marie drinks the juice of the tree of the underworld, these cherry blossoms, these fictional or fantastical kind of source of energy or whatever. Because I feel like the theme of temptation is fairly prevalent here, and in later chapters. I don't think in this case, though, that it's a malevolent thing, though. I don't think that the old school building is really going to trap Marie in its grasp the same way that Hades would trap Persephone. Because in the story, Persephone becomes addicted to pomegranates, essentially, which is kind of silly when you say it like that. But Marie has a very spiritual experience, and she understands that this is, with this relationship with the old school building, this is a good thing. This is something that's kind of forbidden. I don't think that the symbolism of it goes too much deeper than that, unless somebody else has something they want to jump on there. But it was just something that I noticed. I'm 90% certain that that's where the illusion is coming from. I think that's Ryuki's inspiration for the event.
Yeah, that's quite possible. There might be some Japanese analog as well.
Probably.
Quite possibly. But that is not my area of expertise. Maybe someone who knows more about Japanese folklore might be able to comment on this in the forum. I'd be very interested to hear if there's more behind this that we haven't uncovered yet.
Probably.
So why don't we move on to the next chapter?
Sounds good.
Chapter 2, Reaper of the 13th Step. Now, just gonna throw this out there. I don't know if it's still the case now because the polls are broken, but this was a perfect 5 for a long time. Which is wow. I don't think our community has ever agreed on something this much.
It was a really good chapter.
I can talk about this for a while, but this chapter definitely spoke to me on a personal level. The struggle of Aya to fight against her fate. Maybe I should just give a brief recap. So basically the idea is that there's this girl, Aya, who is completely given up on life. It's interesting how Higanbana, the series, portrays all these different characters that have lost the will to live through different reasons. This was a character that hadn't had any traumatic experience. She wasn't being bullied or anything. She was just so apathetic and listless that she felt like her life had no meaning and didn't really see the point in continuing. She didn't really have the drive to kill herself, but she just thought it might be worth it just because there's like no point in living. Like it's kind of like an interesting thing you see in a lot of psychology, where there's a lot of people that just feel like killing themselves just because there's nothing to live for, not because there's anything particularly like horrible about existing. It's just that there's nothing to exist for. It's kind of like a complete absence of any sort of struggle.
That's a mindset that I relate to a lot, actually. I found Aya's character, she's probably honestly my favorite character so far, at least as far as the humans go.
We need more fan out of her, damn it.
Will do. But her whole struggle, like you said, about how she doesn't really feel like she has anything to live for, but she doesn't quite want to kill herself either. That's very relatable to me.
Yes. And like,
I need an Izanami in my life.
And
Izanami.
like Izanami. And like the whole thing about she keeps spending her nights late at night just thinking like, what is the meaning of life? And like this is a question that I think comes to a lot of kids around puberty. It's just, you know, okay, I've been around for like 12 or so years now, why am I here? And like this is like she reaches the conclusion on her own. She's a very smart girl. She reaches the conclusion on her own that there is no meaning in life, and that basically like whenever she would ask someone, she'd always get an evasive response. And she's like, oh, so I guess there really is no meaning. It's not like I'm going to just grow older and understand it. I'm just going to, you know, forget about the question. And so she doesn't like that. And she feels like, oh, so that means life has no meaning. That means I have no reason to exist. And like, this is a very relatable mindset for like, pretty. I'd like to think most people have had this experience at some point in their life where they're just like, without some sort of profound spiritual experience, there's going to be a point where you're wondering like, what's the reason I'm here? And you can't really get answers from other people on that. That's like. It's like the one thing you can't ask mum and dad, because they're not going to give you your reason. And this is something I'm going to be talking about a little bit more as we get later into the chapter, is this whole chapter is about answering that question, and maybe not in the way that you might expect. And so Izanami appears on the scene, this Reaper, because it seems that Aya was half-heartedly wanting to meet Izanami and hoping that he would just like make her disappear, because that's basically what she wants. She just wants like a death free of like responsibility or pain.
Well, she thinks she wants it. She's not made up her mind, I think, entirely.
Yeah, she was, and like when Izanami appears, she is like first fearful, but I guess it's because the first thing Izanami does is he shows her what happens to the people he
It's
captures.
so good. He's just so upfront about it, which is what I love. That's what I love about him as a yokai. Like there was some debate on the forums as to whether Izanami is kind of a benevolent character or a malicious one, but I think he is benevolent because he gives everyone a chance. Like even in the rules of his game, which we'll get to in a second, he's very fair, to the point that he doesn't really, like, the way that he confronts Aya isn't saying, oh, here's a game and we're going to play and I'm going to cheat and I'm going to beat you and that's the game. His whole point is that he informs you and he tells you the rules and he doesn't run.
He doesn't tell you all the rules.
He tells you most of the rules, enough to make it feel fair, which I think is very interesting. A very interesting choice for a supposedly ruthless yokai. And the way that he kills is truly ruthless. You end up turned into a lump of meat inside a giant demon stomach, which isn't...
That was really disturbing, right?
Yeah, that was messed up.
That's probably the most brutal part of Higanbana for me.
I think
like,
so.
obviously, like, there's, like, the psychological aspects, but just, like, the imagery there was so gory.
Yep.
Yep. Going back on a previous point really quickly.
Sure.
When we were talking about how Aya sort of, like, she had this idea that she shouldn't exist, but then when she was faced with something that could actually make that happen, had doubts. I feel like that's part of what makes Aya really human. I think that there's a lot of people who, you know, might have suicidal thoughts or just general, I shouldn't exist, I shouldn't be here. But I feel like if someone on the street came up to you and said, hey, I can make that happen, you would definitely resist.
Yeah, which is what ends up happening.
Yeah, it's very human. And I do wonder, like, this character would have been perfect prey for Higanbana, but she didn't. She didn't show up and take that initiative there.
Yeah.
And that's interesting
Well,
to
the
me.
main
We could
difference
speculate
there-
about that.
The main difference there is that Higanbana preys on people that actually do have the resolve to kill themselves, but Aya was lacking even the resolve to kill herself.
She could have been persuaded, though.
Yeah, she could have done the old give him a nick, send him to the infirmary, slowly whittle them down trick. Like, that's something that Higanbana uses in Night 1, Chapter 7, I believe. Someone
But
who's
then
having suicidal
that's the
thoughts.
question of, like, do we view Higanbana with love or not?
Yeah, this is a great question.
At first, I thought that the yokai were all like these evil, like malevolent spirits that were just out to kill people, but it does seem like a fair bit of them do have compassion. They don't just go and ruthlessly kill people, usually. So just really quickly, when Izanami's game with Aya started, what were your guys' impressions of him?
He's just trying to help her. That was my impression. But that's because that's my perspective on all the yokai. I think that they do really messed up things. They're very inhuman, but they are there to help people. Most of them are.
Yeah. Because I definitely felt like the way that he explained the rules and made it very clear that I'm not going to, like, run.
Yeah.
It made it quite apparent to me that, yeah, this guy is... He's trying to do something for Aya.
Yeah, even when he says, like, oh, I'm gonna catch you, I'm really enjoying chasing you and smelling your fear. Like, I think, he does feed on fear, like, as a yokai, that's a thing that he does. But I think that he's just using his nature as kind of almost part of an act to motivate, Aya.
Reminds me of an image of, like, fee, fi, fo, fum, and just, like,
Yes.
chasing
It does.
chasing a kid down the hallway.
Definitely. As if he's playing on that, like, fairy tale fear of, like, something catching you.
Yeah. It's very much, it feels like a nightmare, which is, like, I think what it's meant to be.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I feel sort of ignorant right now because your guys' impressions of him was, you know, he's trying to help her, but mine was, oh my god, he's just this horrible character. I really thought that he was just in the game for the hunt. I did not expect
It's okay. You got in character. This is fine.
I didn't expect the ending. I really honestly didn't see him as a good guy. I did find really interesting, though, during the marathon scene, I think at the end of it, you do see Izanami in what appears to be like a tracksuit.
Yeah.
How mysterious.
Maybe as if he's like a part-time track coach or something.
Yeah.
Yokai at night, track coach at day.
Vice, what do you think of this?
I honestly, at that point, hadn't that big thoughts about Izanami himself because I was kind of preoccupied with thinking about the metaphorical aspect of running being similar to living, whereas the stagnation and apathy she had before is, pretty much a metaphor for death. So my mind was preoccupied with those thoughts, and thus I didn't really think that much about the characters themselves.
That's cool. That's definitely like something that's a huge part of this chapter is how, you know, as the PE teacher, I guess his job is there to inspire kids like Marie to take up a hobby and find something that gives them pleasure in life, I guess you could say. And, you know, we can talk a lot about how running itself, any physical activity, is like good for the mind because it releases endorphins and it, like, I don't want to be like a fitness freak here or anything, but just
It's okay, we get it.
Kind of like,
you're better than us.
Just kind of like how expending energy that you're not wasting is good for the body, good for the mind, and it just makes you feel good. Like they talk a lot about how Marie couldn't sleep at night because her brain was always filled with thoughts, and she was always like, she had all this energy she wasn't using, and then towards the end of the chapter, she's like sleeping really well every night because she's just running all day. And it's just like, that's obviously a very, on the surface level, it's a very pro-exercise message. Get out there and do some running, kids.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's about the fact that she's able to find the spice of life, you could say. She's found comfort in her own existence.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I want to talk real quick about the fact that Izanami, especially in the marathon, he tells Aya to empty her mind, and like not think about life, because that's kind of, as you said, that's something that young people do. They think about life. They think they know everything.
Very Buddhist.
Yeah, I personally, I don't agree with the idea that you should just empty your mind and not think about things. I think that, especially if we look at Rikuchi's other works, I'm not going to talk about that too much, but if you look at his other works, Umineko in particular, that work encourages you to be very critical of things. There's a lot of philosophy worked in there. So I don't think that Rikuchi thinks that you should just empty your mind all the time. But I think that Izanami's point is that when you feel overwhelmed by life, when you feel like there's nothing you can do, or you're having suicidal thoughts, it's okay to find a hobby, to find an outlet for all your like frustration energy. And it can be something as simple as running. It doesn't have to be like debate club or whatever. It can be something very simple.
It doesn't have to be like humanitarian work or... It
doesn't have to be. It can be, though. But
it can be.
But Izanami's point is that something simple can help you. Something,
yeah, I think we're on the same page here.
Yeah, I think we are. Something as simple as running can really help you to work things through, giving yourself some focus in life.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, the answer she reaches at the end is like, the meaning of life, maybe it doesn't have a meaning, but maybe just living is enough of a meaning.
Yeah.
And that's like such an important message, I feel. This is something which like really hit me hard personally, because I am prone to have like existential thoughts late at night, like a lot of people, and sometimes it's just, you can find comfort in existing itself.
Yeah.
And
the struggle of life.
Yeah, I guess. Like, Izanami gave Aya that struggle. She gave her something to fight against. Yeah. And so life started gaining started gaining meaning, because like, just sitting in class every day, it might be a struggle, but it doesn't feel like one. It's just kind of like the numbing sensation taking you over of the everyday becoming overwhelming. This is something we just talked about earlier in Higanbana too. But this is a very different sort of case where if you're fighting for your life, it feels like there's a lot more on the line. It feels like there's a lot more reason to live, even if it's an illusion. It's still like important to like find that sense of satisfaction in living through that. And I feel like this sounds very negative, but I really don't think it is, because like, if you look at what Izanami is preaching here, he's saying that if you are spending your time thinking about what the meaning of life is, you need a hobby. It's like very like it's talking down that kind of behavior, and I think that's a very good message personally, because what do you get about thinking about the meaning of life? Like, what do you get out of that? Like, at most you might like gain an inspiration to do more with your life, sure, but like, I feel like most of the time we spend worrying about that kind of question is just pointless anxiety. Like, the fact that we're going to die someday isn't something we should be thinking about all the time. It's just the fact. So why waste time worrying about it when we could be doing something with our life? I think that's really what Izanami is trying to get at here. And that's a really, really cool message to me.
I think it's a very compelling argument. As I said, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that for me, thinking about life and like the purpose of it, my philosophy is that even though there is no meaning to life, it's what humans create that gives it meaning. So that's why I enjoy like reading art. Art, such a big loofy term, but like, I like looking at stories and characters that are constructed by other people. Oh, it absolutely is. I just am not a huge fan of the work. It's often thrown around. It's like, oh, I'm better than you. I can appreciate art. But like, it's true. Like, that's a thing that I find meaning in. And I think that I think that it's okay to think about life, but if you're just going around in circles, if you're thinking by yourself and not listening to other people and trying to actually work things out, if it's just a depressive cycle for you, that's unhealthy. Right. But actively trying to figure things out, I think, can be very helpful. I personally believe in the noble goal idea that Izanami is kind of anti to, which I found interesting because he has a noble goal. His noble goal is to help people like work shit out in their lives through his endless running maze of death. But yeah, I don't mean to like detract from your point. I think that the argument that he makes is very compelling and it's very interesting, and that for people who are having problems with, you know, knowing the unknowable, with understanding the complexities of life, I don't think that that's possible. I think that it's okay to stop, take a step back, and just be a healthy person, just to live. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, and I think that's what Ryukishi's really getting at here. It's a message to all the people who waste their time with depressive thoughts and just that don't really go anywhere. Because there are questions that don't have answers. Yeah. That's very much a fact of life. And to dwell on that point is pointless.
That message is something that I'm on the fence about it. I mean, I do understand Izanami's point, but I also understand the other side, where you do want to know, you know, why do you exist? I do spend a lot of my time thinking about that. And sometimes
I guess this podcast is coming across as very anti-religious or spiritual, and I really don't want it to go too far in that direction, but anyway, continue. That's a disclaimer.
I don't think that thinking about what the meaning of life is should be an all-consuming thing, and sometimes for me it is. I don't really feel like Izanami's message is discard that entirely. It's just that if it's controlling your life, go find something to do. Find something that you can take pleasure in, that can distract you from it, something that can give you your own personal meaning. Something to look forward to.
Good answer. And like, I don't know, I was mashing that screenshot key the whole time through the marathon scene. There was some good quotes there. I'm just looking through them now. Vice, do you have anything else you want to add to this? You haven't spoken much.
One thing one forum member brought up is Izanami began his little contest with saying as a Shinigami he cannot lie, like it's actually impossible for him or something, and he says in the rules for the game that he will never run, but that forum user then criticized that at the marathon he did run.
But so that's not the game.
What do we make of that?
That's not the game. Oh, it's so simple. He said, I will not run when I'm chasing you in the game, and that's like the marathon isn't the game. Izanami is not intending on catching Aya at the end there. He's just putting the pressure on to like push her to that runner's high that she gets at the end when she like tumbles into the finish line. Like, he's just pushing her. That's all it is. He doesn't mean like, I'm going to catch you and kill you, because if he really wanted to, it wouldn't be a problem for him. He's a yokai. It doesn't matter how fast he can run, because he's a freaking scary supernatural creature. Right?
I feel like Izanami is that teacher that every kid needs, but not every kid gets.
Yeah.
Somebody that can motivate you, even if you don't necessarily like the method that they're taking to do that.
He is better than all the teachers in Higanbana, and
this is true.
He's also a yokai.
That is very true. We have a lot of sketchy teachers.
Oh my goodness. I can't wait for chapter 4 discussion.
Best boy. I guess the one thing we like kind of danced around is like that scene at the end where the black tea gentleman and Izanami are humans.
Yes.
It's very intriguing. I guess it's like this feels like a very Umineko moment. But I don't think it's worth looking into it too deeply. Maybe these yokai do live double lives where like they can inhabit a human form, and then when they're in their own parallel universe they can be a yokai. Because that's definitely what ended up happening. Like, whenever she met Izanami, it was in a school devoid of people. So it's like kind of cut off from the real world. But like maybe he is like a teacher under the the light of day.
I do
It's
wonder
interesting.
if the next chapter has something to do with that.
And I don't know if there's anything to make there of the Black Tea Gentleman literally being the vice principal of the school. Does he have contact with Midori? We don't really know. It's kind of like an interesting little tinge of intrigue, I guess. Okay, so next chapter then? Chapter 3, The Mirror World. Oh, Welcome to the Mirror World, sorry.
Either way.
This was very much a comic relief chapter. I don't expect we'll be talking too much about it, but I don't know, Vice, tell us about this chapter. Just very briefly.
So, Kyo of the Mirror World is amazed by Marie's mirror washing technique.
So. What even is going on? Kyo is just, I don't get him. He's such an edgelord, and he's impressed by things that don't make any sense. Whatever. It's fine.
So he
likes
wants
mirrors.
Marie to
I guess
help.
so.
So he wants Marie to help her wash the mirrors in one of the mirror worlds because the cure of that mirror world got complacent and the mirrors got all dirty. So Marie goes on her merry way and meets all different versions of all the yokai. So, and we see the headmaster and Sumire and Higanbana being all meek and not at all like they are usually. And Sakunoshin is suddenly a prankster and a drunkard.
Yeah. I freaking love that. And that's when, like, Midnight Clock starts playing. I'm like, what perfect music for this scene.
Is that how the track in Higanbana is called?
Yeah.
Midnight
The
Clock.
remix of Monochrome Clock from Amenenee.
Yeah. And then we get shown that this was actually all a plot of alternate Marie, who wanted to conquer another world. Like
Shadow
totally
Marie. Oh my goodness.
The typical villain conquering the world plot. It's amazing.
No, she was conquering the multiverse. It's a whole different scale. So cheesy. I just love the scene where Geragara Marie infiltrates our world and finds Higanbana, and like they have a duel.
Yeah.
And she totally beats Higanbana. It's like, wow. The power of a reversal. I found it interesting how Kyo pointed out that like there's many different mirror worlds and each one reverses a different thing. So this one is the reverse personalities world. So that means there's probably a reverse gender world as well. And just all sorts of different reversions. But strange of Ryukishi to point that out, but that's so like him. Like giving mechanics to this stupid thing.
Yeah.
Because like I guess that is a point like you see in fiction a lot where it's like you go to an alternate reality and everything's opposite, but it's like what's opposite? Like we need more fundamental. We need a more concrete variable that's being reversed here, and he made that very clear. It's reverse personalities, so turning the humble into the assertive, turning the aggressive into the weak.
One thing that I do wonder, though, is even though you could consider this chapter mainly included for comic relief, after the Kyo from the Mirror World is found, he seems to have the same sense of duty as the Kyo from our world. So I wonder what sort of personality changes are, for Kyo, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because we didn't really see much difference between the two.
Well,
They
Kyo
seem pretty much the
himself
same.
actually explained that he's pretty much exempt of these changes because he governs the mirrors.
Is that
Okay,
how it
well that makes sense. As far as Marie, though, I feel like she sort of went into the mirror world expecting to find a version of her that she dreamed of being. Like maybe she views herself as very undesirable and was expecting to find like this perfect version of her. But for the mere Marie to be so like cruel and tyrannical, it sort of feels like the original Marie isn't all that bad. I mean, I feel like that's what she would probably take from it, is that she's not as undesirable as she thinks, because look at what she could be.
Yeah, she specifically says that the flipped version of herself will be cheerful, brave, and optimistic. Yeah. Which she's already most of that. Like, she's definitely brave. She tries to be optimistic as much as she can. She's working on the cheerful part. Like, the fact that she thinks of herself as being the opposite of that is very telling to her character. She's very self-demeaning, I guess. And it's very interesting then to see that the opposite of her, the opposite that Ryukashi is portraying at least, is like a megalomaniac who wants to take over the multiverse. So I think that we get kind of a double-edged sword there with learning about Mare as a character. So I really enjoyed this chapter to show us, like, if this is how Higanbana is the opposite way, then how is she really? I thought that was really cool. There's also some discussion of how the mirror reflects the heart, and how, like, these other versions of themselves, like, it's kind of like, it's sort of like a parallel universe thing where, like, Maria could have been this way but isn't. I don't know. I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think about why
I sort of take it as
they might change to be that way. Sorry, continue.
Sorry. The way that I sort of took it was the mirror version of Marie. I mean, obviously it's very opposite from the Marie that we know, but back to the point of the mirror world possibly, like, being interpreted as a reflection of the heart, I feel like she could have the capacity to be that way.
Definitely.
Like, she really could stand up for herself in a situation where she needed to. I mean, I hope that at least meeting her mirror self sort of gave her insight as to she's not as low as she thinks she is. I hope that she got a confidence boost.
Yeah, I think that's the main point of this chapter, is like highlighting how Mare thinks of herself so poorly, and how, you know, there's maybe value to be found in what you are. This is, I guess, a message we can all take upon ourselves, is that we may, like, think lowly of ourselves, but if you just imagine what we could be, all the shitty things we could be doing, maybe maybe not so bad.
Yeah, and it's the same with the way that Mare perceives Higanbana, because she's very, like, annoyed with the fact that Higanbana makes her, like, go get rice cakes, and she's kind of bullied around by her friend. But then she sees the Higanbana of the mirror world, who's very meek and subservient, and she's totally, like, it's Higanbana of the mirror world is just not even a character. She doesn't think for herself. She's not assertive. She is barely deserved of the title of yokai, or even just being a person in that world, because she has such a little, like, influence over anything that happens. Same with the headmaster and Sumire, like, they just are doing whatever Mare wants, and that's it. I think that there's some value being placed on Higanbana's independence and assertiveness in the regular world. Not to say that she's completely blameless, but I think that we really learn about how Mare is, like, this is the ideal Higanbana. Like, you're asking for a slave. You're asking for someone who just does whatever you want and is the way that you expect them to be all the time. And I don't think that that's, like, a healthy way to be. I think that if everyone...
It's like
you go.
None of the opposites were healthy.
No, not at all.
I still think it's very telling of Marie's character, though, because she goes into this mirror world where Higanbana is totally, like, timid. She doesn't want to make Marie mad, and Marie still doesn't take advantage of her.
Yeah.
She doesn't bully her around, despite her somewhat negative feeling towards being sort of pushed around herself.
Yeah, she doesn't take advantage of it to get one over on Higanbana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Aspie, I think there's one character that we could say is healthy, or neutral, I guess, because we did see mirror version of Michiru, who basically gave almost everyone Battle flashbacks with being all anti-fantasy.
It was so silly.
That was pretty funny.
Michiru's
I guess she was at least functional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make me wonder if all of the other students from the mirror world are very fantasy-oriented, though.
It did seem that way because all the other students were talking about were asking her about supernatural stuff, and she was all like, "What the hell are you talking about? Fantasy is bullshit."
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to delve too much of this chapter. I think we already got pretty much everything we can get out of it.
Yeah.
So let's jump into. Hey.
Sorry. There is one thing I did want to say about the ending.
Sorry. Go on.
I found it somewhat amusing that, like, the mere Marie sort of bullied Higanbana, like, gave her a taste of her own medicine unknowingly, and then the original Marie sort of rolled with it and was like, be better to your friends.
Yeah.
I like that she got to make the point that she wanted to make without having to be directly mean, like, with her own, like, original self, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It was nice that she got a little bit of a comeback there. I definitely like that Marie is showing signs that she can stand up for herself against Higanbana and doesn't want to just be a doormat, because that's definitely not a healthy relationship either. But
I feel like that's a really significant development character-wise from the Marie we know from the first chapter of the first night.
Yeah, definitely. She's assertive.
There's another chapter where they kind of go into more about the dynamic of Marie and Higanbana, but we haven't reached that point yet, so we'll talk about that later. I'll bring that up in the next podcast.
Look forward to
it.
Okay, so let's jump right into the final chapter of this podcast, The Boy's Portrait.
Yes.
As you'd expect, coming from a very lighthearted chapter, we're getting ready for some serious shit, and this chapter doesn't disappoint.
Personally, I really liked this chapter.
It might be my favorite out of the four. Oh, I love it so much.
Yeah, it was really good.
Alright, so Higanbana, Night 2, Chapter 4, The Boy's Portrait. This was a very complex chapter, I felt. We hit a lot of points in a very short period of time. Basically, we're learning about Renoir, the boy with a whip, and the 6th rank yokai.
Spoilers!
Spoilers! Oh no, I've ruined everything.
Boy.
But this boy with a whip here essentially is trying to get revenge for a dearly departed friend named Yuki, who is bullied by his female teacher and then murdered. It's kind of left up in the air.
We don't know this at first, though.
This is true.
At first, it looks like Renoir.
This is true. We're slightly misled in the beginning because we're told about this ghost story about this yokai entity in the art room who you have to answer a bunch of questions to, and you can't lie, and you have to answer all these nonsense questions. And we're shown the last thing that we're shown of Yuki before we're told that he's been killed. Is that he's being asked who the artist of a certain painting is in the art room, and it's kind of implied that he's been killed by the yokai. However, we learn through a series of interrogations, which I really enjoyed, this battle of wits between Renoir and this art teacher Shintani, who is just the worst character. And Higanbana also lending some support. We learn about Shintani's abuse of younger boys in the school, using her position as a teacher and as an attractive person to seduce young boys. This is a thing that's happening. And to
I was reading this and I'm just like,
it's very
is this really
uncomfortable.
going in this direction?
Yeah,
it made me very uncomfortable.
I had some theories earlier on, like when he mentioned that when Yuki mentioned that he had
like the first thing she said is like, sorry, I'm not into older guys. It's like,
as soon as she said that, I was like,
enough.
She's doing bad things with younger kids. Yuki has grazes on his arms. She's doing some very bad things.
You reached that conclusion immediately, did you?
Here's the thing. I really enjoyed this chapter because I was able to put the clues together and figure things out. And yet it was still interesting to read, even though I feel like I solved this chapter relatively early on.
I was doubting myself.
Written.
I was doubting myself because I got those warning signs early on, but I was like, surely not.
Oh,
it's just such a thing.
Yeah.
It's just a thing we
don't talk about.
It's not in Western culture. It's not in Japanese culture either. This is something that people
Yeah.
don't like talking about.
Yeah. So,
Female rapists. It's
exactly.
It's such a taboo topic.
It's
But
something.
it's something
Only
that should be
but
spoken of.
pedophiles,
Molesters,
though.
or whatever you want to call them.
Oh my
Sorry, what were you
goodness.
saying, Vice?
Go, Vice.
I mean, it's not only just that it's a female rapist, but it's also a female pedophile.
Yeah.
Yes,
much.
yes, yes.
There's like
exactly.
1,000 taboos thrown into one, which is really
Yeah.
interesting that Rikishi's trying to tackle this topic. I think he does it fairly well. Although the queen bee metaphor just got a little bit out of hand at points.
Unsettlingly well.
Yeah.
Ryukishi's ability to get into criminal minds is something else.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, so by the end of the chapter, of course, everything has been put to right. Shintani ends up in a painting of an endless staircase. What's the, ascending, descending is the painting.
Yeah, it's a famous optical illusion, I think.
Yes, definitely.
MC Escher. I did a art project on that when I was in high school.
Yeah. And she's tricked in a similar way to how Kanamori was tricked in Chapter 1, Night 1, with them not understanding the rules entirely. And this was something that I thought was very interesting, that there's a long back and forth between Higanbana and Renoir and Shintani, where they're questioning her on the titles of the paintings, and up until this point before the twist at the end, to show how Shintani has been tricked. There's a lot of emphasis put on the knowledge of the paintings and your knowledge of who made what and what everything means. And yet Shintani is tricked by something so simple as just not recognizing Renoir because they cut their hair, which I thought was very amusing.
But I do want to talk a little bit about the Battle of Wits here, because
Sure.
it was very suspenseful.
It was very good.
I loved it. Just we go through so many stages. Of the first stage is just her being confronted with this yokai and gradually realizing it's a yokai. Because at first she's like, oh, it's a kid. Oh no, this kid is gonna rat me out. But it's wait a second, this kid might not be human. And just suddenly realizing that handing the pen is a sentence to death.
Yeah.
And just this whole Battle of Wits, where it turns out where she has been forced to confront with the reality that this is Renoir, the story she's heard about, and that once she's able to put a name to that face, the threat becomes a lot less threatening.
Yeah, well, she's able to combat Renoir on somewhat even ground, which isn't... I don't know that we've seen that before with a human and a yokai being in combat in that way. Because usually
but this is
the human is on the back foot.
This is very much a Ryukishi thing. He loves talking about this with his commentary on horror, is that it's only horror if you don't understand it.
Yeah,
The
totally.
moment you can rationalize it and put rules and a name to it, it's no longer... It may be supernatural, but it becomes more within the realm of humanity to comprehend and combat against. It's like the difference between a supernatural spirit and an alien, because one of them is very much grounded in reality, and one is something incomprehensible. But if you could give that spirit a name, and you could tell, oh, it works by ectoplasm, and if you just get a vacuum cleaner, you can suck it up, it's no longer a threat.
You know how to deal with it.
It's very human psychology there, and how we think about horror, and that horror needs to have an element of the unknown. And so when she gains that knowledge on Renoir, it becomes a battle on uneven grounds, and that became very interesting, because you see Renoir seemingly getting cornered, and you're oh no, I actually don't know who's going to come out on top here. I'd hope it's Renoir, but things aren't looking good.
Which is, of course, very interesting that we're rooting for the yokai in this situation and not the human.
Yeah,
I still find that
absolutely.
fascinating. I think that the line between human and yokai is being blurred even more.
But you still feel for Shintani being cornered here, just as a basic human empathetic response. It's just you can feel her fear.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess the other twist when it came around, where it's name who drew all these drawings of these children.
That was so good.
That was a good scene.
Because she just says
I was
it.
actually already expecting that.
Yeah.
I was expecting
Absolutely.
that question.
I was with Higanbana. The fact that she just outright said, it was me, instantly, that was phenomenal to me, because that was not what I was expecting. I was like,
we also
okay,
didn't mention that it was also Higanbana in disguise for this whole battle.
Yeah, Higanbana was helping Renoir by being disguised as him.
Because Renoir is just too much of a weakling to deal with this shit.
Yeah, he's very powerless.
Higanbana senpai, help me.
Pretty much. I thought that was really cool that she would help someone out. More indication that Higanbana is a good person, is all I'm saying. I mean, apart from the endless hell bit at the end, but either way.
But yeah, the fact that she admits it and just like comes out, it's just, oh my god, like Higanbana like fully like acknowledges her as like scum.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
Like you're the kind of person we're working to stop from like getting their way.
Yeah.
You've encroached in our territory. I love that line.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing that didn't quite make sense to me was, if you were doing drawings like that, why would you keep them in your work desk?
Because she's overconfident.
Which also brings the question, did she really keep them in her work desk, or did Higanbana just use like some sort of yokai magic to
like spawn them in? Like, we need a plot point here to get you with. Yeah, maybe.
Well, I thought to myself, or my response to that would be that, I mean, we had that whole queen bee metaphor, so pretty much Shintani felt herself as so safe that she could keep those drawings in her work desk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
She thinks of
simply
the art
how
room as
safe
her
she felt.
hunting grounds, right? Like, this is her domain, she rules this place. Which I thought was very
That's
interesting.
another point that I thought was sort of strange. She didn't seem to feel very much compassion for, or I guess I should say sympathy for what happened to Yuki, but I feel like ultimately she does realize that what she's doing is wrong.
Yeah. Well,
She knows it's wrong and she admits it. She fully embraces it.
she knows she might be
That's
caught.
the sign of a terrifying person.
She knows she might be caught, right? She might have her entire career taken away from her if she's caught doing these things. I don't think that she cares about the people she's doing this to. I don't think that she knows that it's wrong. She knows that society thinks it's wrong. Once again, yeah, the way that she like objectifies the boys, I think, is pretty horrible. Like, she talks about their porcelain white skin, and she's taking their honey and all this stuff. Like, she's like, oh, they're just bees.
The fact that Yuki loved her.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a big deal here.
It's control through love, which is something that I kind of want Rikushi to write a bit more about, because he's always talking about how important love is, and yet this is a situation where love is used in the opposite way. If Yuki has love, then Yuki is willing to go along with this bullshit. I don't know. I wonder about that. That's just something that occurred to me. That
Makes me wonder if that new manga he's releasing goes into that aspect of it.
Like when the game ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very interested to read that. It's like, what I have read is like incredibly dark. Shoutouts to When the Game Ends. Basically the plot of that is it's a guy's like harem fantasy come to life, but the plot twist, which is revealed like in the first chapter, it's not really a spoiler, is that all of the girls being forced into his harem are doing so like after being tortured by a demon. It's like, if you don't want to go to hell and spend the eternity in hell, you have to like be a flirt with this guy.
right.
It's really fucked up.
It's a harem deconstruction, then, is it? That's
it's a harem deconstruction.
Oh,
yeah.
I need to read that.
Yeah, Zephyr in our forum is like doing some unofficial translations at the moment, so definitely.
And
like,
apparently
contact him.
Zephyr is also the name of that demon in that story.
Yeah.
From what I gathered.
So let's get back on track. I just wanted to do that quick shout out.
It feels to me like Renoir made a friend out of Yuki. Like, he's genuinely caring. He wants to, like, basically avenge his friend.
It's such
even
a
if he
wholesome
can't do it
story.
alone.
that friendship they have is like so wholesome, and it like, I love the quotes of how like Renoir feels like he is able to gain something from humans like him. Become more human
definitely.
himself or something.
It makes me wonder, though, did Yuki fail the question at the very beginning about who made the painting? Or did he...
I don't think it matters. I don't think that Renoir would have killed him even if he failed it.
Actually, yeah.
That's my opinion.
What you said.
Yeah, I mean,
possible.
The way that Renoir talks at the end of the novel, as we're shown, as things do, because of this traumatic experience and the Shintani stuff, all that bullshit, the art room is now a positive place.
I love that so much.
Yeah, like Renoir chats
favorite.
with kids and like teaches them about art, and they talk together, even though he doesn't really understand a lot about art, which we're kind of shown when he... I don't remember what the painting is that he's looking at, but he's like, oh, the brushstroke is quite nice, or the colors are very vibrant. Like, he doesn't seem to really understand the art that he's talking about that well, but just the fact that he's talking about it with other people is changing the ghost story and making it something really positive in the school. I think this is intentional by Ugushi. I think it's especially relevant as a member of a community that's all about theory crafting, because there's a big theme in Higanbana about how you can empower others with less power, and how people with less power can gain power by acting. And this is very personal to me, so I'm struggling to kind of put it in a context properly. But I feel like it's a really important message that even though Renoir doesn't understand things as well as, say, the old art teacher, like she knew everything about all of those paintings, and yet it's Renoir who's the one who's having the positive influence. I think that there's really a message about how even if you don't know everything about art, even if you don't know all the like critical philosophical terms, if you can't analyze motifs, even though you can't like explain everything in Umaneko or Higanbana or whatever, that doesn't matter. The point is that you're approaching this art, you're approaching the message that the author is trying to tell you, you're appreciating something creative. Like, I think that there's a really
you're creating
positive
meaning for yourself in that.
Yeah, well, you're also creating meaning for other people, and this is something that I personally find really important, that when I am reading something, I want to talk with people about it. I want to talk with people who know a lot. I want to talk to people who know very little.
Important.
And I want
it's important considering this is a Rekenjima.
Yes, exactly. I want, like, everyone benefits. Everyone benefits from a varied discussion from people with different perspectives. So when someone says something like, I don't know what I can talk about this novel, someone says, somebody's already said my point before, like, say it anyway. It doesn't matter how much you have to say. Say something.
I feel personally attacked.
I'm not trying to attack you. I'm sorry. I don't mean to, but like, more voices and more perspectives and more approaches to art is going to create a much more interesting discussion. Like, to use a visual metaphor, it's like a ball of rubber bands, right? If everyone puts a rubber band, no matter how thick or thin, eventually you end up with this big ball of discussion, and that's what we want. We want to see all these different interpretations to create something unique and wonderful that everyone can benefit from. That might sound really...
You're taking the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, this sounds very lofty, I'm sure, and like far-reaching, but this is how I feel. This is how this chapter made me feel. It spoke to me on a very personal level. Yeah, if you have anything to add.
That's everything we're trying to do at the Kazoku Collective is pretty much for that.
Yeah.
We have communities built around, appreciating and discussing art and sharing conflicting interpretations and clashing of ideas and seeing what happens. And,
absolutely.
Just kind of like enriching each other's experience through these book clubs and tea parties where we can read a story together and like having the conflicting or contrasting, I'll say, not conflicting, the contrasting perspectives of other people to enhance your experience of reading the story can really get you so much more out of the narrative than otherwise if you just would have read it and just like consumed it like fast food. It feels like if you really want to get the most out of art, be it a painting or Higanbana, you really need to take the time to process it yourself and find meaning in it for your own self.
Yeah.
And discussing is a great way to help that.
Yeah. And after all, art itself is the opening of a dialogue. Ryukishi doesn't always give answers, especially in Higanbana. That's something I've criticized him for a little bit, especially in Chapter 1, Night 1, Chapter 7. But the dialogue that he opens up with Chapter 2 and Chapter 4, the fact that we have people on Rekenjima.org talking about disagreeing and agreeing is so important. The fact that it's generating discussion is what's important. Art isn't about giving a defined answer. It's about generating discussion and making people think. Anyway.
That's a really good way to put it, actually.
But yeah, I guess like one other thing we didn't really bring up is how like Ryukishi has some comment on art in this about how like these paintings are all really like dark and disturbing, but it's kind of important to gain a sense of the disturbing to broaden your own view of the world. The quote was, "If all you ever see are pleasant and pretty things, then that can have a negative influence on your mental and emotional state."
Right. I mean, if you're sheltered from negative things your entire life, how would you know how to react the first time that you saw that? Because, I mean, obviously, when you become an adult and you get out on your own, life's not always going to go smoothly. There's going to be negative experiences. You won't always be under your parents' like watchful gaze.
Yeah, and art is like such a safe medium to like experience those kind of more negative emotions and indulge in them, just as almost like a bit of a, I guess, anti-venom, you could say, to the horrors of, you know, real life tragedy, and just being able to experience horrible things in art. Like, I think Ryukishi's maybe tooting his horn a little bit here. It's like, guys, you can read Higanbana and just like see all these horrible things, and then, you know, that can help make your own life feel a little better. It's almost like cathartic, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a great
You know, in some ways, Ryukishi is sort of like a substitute parent, or like a guidance counselor. Because even if you don't have somebody in your life personally to teach you lessons like this, by reading his work, it's something that you can get out of it.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, he's sort of like an Izanami in his own way.
Ryukishi-senpai, we love you. Or sensei,
Please don't chase me
as
on
it
the
were.
stairs.
Please don't stay.
I have very low stamina.
But no, I think it's very aptly put, and I feel like that's a trait of many great writers, is they want to share their view of the world and enrich people's life experience in some small way. And I can safely say that Ryukishi's done that for me, enough for me to want to create a website dedicated to him.
Yeah, I guess you must have
beautiful.
some investment in his work, maybe just a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. I may have felt something.
Yeah.
I do wonder, though, for an author to have such a wide, like, range of topics to cover, so many, like, existential topics and questions to ask, what all he's been through. Like, what inspired him?
Well, you do realize that he worked in child support services for a while.
It's a big
I did
part
not
of
know
it.
that, actually.
Yeah, that's a big part of this.
Well, I don't know if that's that specific, but he's definitely worked with children and seen the horrible things that can happen to children, and that's certainly influenced his work a lot with Higurashi, with Umineko, with Higanbana. Pretty much all of them feature troubled kids, and just like, I guess that really like conveyed to him how he's seen some shit, and he really wants the world to think about this and not turn a blind eye to it. And that's why art is great, because you can convey taboo topics like a female pedophile and not have it be the real world. Like, it's removed from the consequences of being a actual person. We can just look at this from a purely art standpoint and then reflect on our own lives of, maybe this is happening in the real world, maybe we can do something about it. It's about raising awareness, and I think that's a very noble goal, and that's why I'm so glad that we're reading Higanbana for the first time, because, you know, this is a work which has been largely unrecognized, and it's so sad because the messages portrayed in this story are so important, and I really hope that more people take the time to listen and think about how, you know, maybe they can do something in their own life to combat these tragedies. Whether it be like doing something to stop bullying, or just calling attention to things that are not good.
It encourages discussion and action, I think, which is really cool.
Absolutely. And I guess that about wraps up our discussion for this week. Shoutouts to our fan art. Shoutouts to Zetfo, produced this little art of Higanbana. And we also have art, a bunch of doodles from Pockety Hat. Really impressed. Like, I think she's been really getting back into her drawing lately. We recently had a stream where she did a bunch of doodles for the 5th of October. That was very entertaining. But she did a bunch of Higanbana art. She got some Higanbanas, some Maries, and even a hilarious Mitsuru, which is like my favorite art from this whole book club so far, of her like about to throw the fire
Mikuru, no!
so
good. She looks so shocked.
We also have a drawing of Higanbana from Tsukiyo Alex. And you, Anemone, you did a wonderful drawing of Higanbana, which you've actually put as your avatar. I'm a big fan of this one. It's very cool.
So creepy. I love it.
I think you captured her expression really well. I particularly really like that. So thank you so much. So we've got one more week left of the book club, assuming there's going to be no delays. I won't say never. It's possible because people are slow. But we'll see how we go. So thank you to all who have supported the book club so far. We've got 3 more chapters to go, and there's going to be some interesting discussion we can have from those for sure. So thank you once again for joining me, everybody, and thank you to our audience for listening in. Shout out to Black Rune, Ferris B, Kyote, and Sukiyo. There might have been some other people that dropped out, but sorry, I don't see you at the moment. And yeah, everyone listening on YouTube, we hope you're really enjoying these book club podcasts. Even if the book club's already over by the time you listening to these, we'd really appreciate if you jump on the forum and share your thoughts on the various discussion topics we have for each of these chapters. I think it would be awesome if we could get your perspectives, and if you have something new to add to the discussion, we're always happy to come back to it. So yeah, so see you next week, everybody, for the final podcast of the book club. Jane!
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.